we're basically like an NFL team, you and me, Mike. They go through these off seasons, they go through this whole process, and then they try to cultivate something. I'm sorry, guys. It was a bad one, but we're back. Team recap. We got the Indianapolis Colts. How you doing?
That was really bad. I'm not gonna lie. You've been kind of the intro guy, and I might have to start taking him over because that was rough, Mike.
It
But
was.
but I guess on the bright side, kind of the opposite of rough. We'll get right into the Colts draft class. Mike, what were your thoughts on what Indianapolis did?
Yeah, I like it actually. I like it actually quite a bit. Obviously, I think the Michael Pittman pick, I think it makes so much sense for that team. I think T.Y. Hilton needed that number two, someone to kind of throw some double teams maybe the other way or kind of get some of the pressure off him. Because in a lot of ways, T.Y. Hilton is an over-the-top kind of player, and I think that double teaming and putting a safety up top kind of takes some of that ability away. Obviously, still be able to produce with that, but being able to put Michael Pittman on the other side, I think will take so much pressure off T.Y. Hilton, and I think it's going to do some magic for this team. And I think another, obviously, it doesn't show when you look at the draft class in a whole, but that trade for DeForest Buckner, that's a player, and I think he's a top for me, top three D tackle, and I think out of three right now, people get a lot of the kind of headlines are Aaron Donald, Chris Jones, and DeForest Buckner. DeForest Buckner might be the most well-rounded out of those three. I think his potential to not also like be able to rush the passer, but also just be like a space eater, be able to affect the run. I think people don't really think about him that too much in that way sense. Maybe because his body type, he's really not the guy you'd think to do it at what 6'8", 290, something close to that. But he's probably the best out of those three at doing that. So I think that speaks so much, and I think it's going to do wonders for this team.
No, I agree. I mean, you talk about DeForest Buckner. I mean, that's a guy who can really play like 1 through 7 on that D line. You can line him up anywhere, and he'll be effective. And I think that was a lot of his value when he was coming out, and I think that's a lot of his value in this trade, for sure. And then the Michael Pittman pick, man, I can't applaud this pick enough. If you think of what is kind of the perfect complement to a receiver like Ty, it is a big body who's going to go up, make those contested catches. Maybe he's not going to be elite at creating separation because that's what Ty does, but they can fight for those balls, and I think that's the epitome of Michael Pittman. I one thing that I'm kind of not sure on is really he kind of dominated college football last year, but one kind of hesitancy that I had when deciding like, oh, is this a first round or second round guy, is that he actually is going to be a 23-year-old rookie. So I do wonder if some of that like dominance they showed, even like the physicality when he was run blocking, like he was making people look like little kids out there last season. And I do kind of wonder if maybe it's because he was 20, 22 going up against 18, 19, 20-year-old guys, and then in the NFL maybe that gap's going to close. I do wonder with that a little bit, but I do think just in terms of prototypes and kind of archetypes, I do think that Michael Pittman is the perfect complement for a guy like Ty. And then after that, obviously, Jonathan Taylor, I think that he was kind of, I don't want to say the most underlooked of kind of the top 3 or 4 backs in the class, but, man, his production at Wisconsin speaks for itself. I know some people worried about, like, his durability issues, given that he had, 900 carries in college. But as we're going to see next slide, you're putting him into a stable of running backs, man. So I can't really hate on that either, especially when some of these guys are on shorter deals. And he even though he has a bunch of carries now, these next couple of years he might have a reduced workload, and then you can kind of ramp it up as he enters his prime. I think that's a really interesting pick. And Julian Blackmon as well, even at safety. Right now you have Malik Hooker at free safety. He's on an expiring deal. There's a lot of kind of uncertainty if they'll bring him back. Obviously you hope they do, but even if they don't, Julian Blackmon, he's a converted cornerback to safety, so he's good in coverage, especially man coverage actually, and he's a pretty solid tackler. So I really wouldn't mind running almost like two kind of balanced free safeties. We'll say that because I do think Malik has a lot of those same traits, but obviously he's a little bit better. The only problem with Blackmon is I believe he's coming off an ACL injury this past season, which is why he fell a little bit. But overall, you said it. in our Lions video that this is that, that mid-third round is kind of when you take chances on guys like that. And I do agree that Blackman is a solid player there. So other than that, did you have any thoughts on the rest of their players, or are you ready to get into the offense?
Yeah, I got one more real quick. I'll get out there. As a day 3 pick, being able to take Jacob Eason, I think obviously he had kind of that early speculation. Like people had him sometimes late first, early second, which was obviously asinine to say the least. But I think being able to take him in that 4th round, have him as a kind of a developmental piece, sit behind Phillip Rivers, learn from him. I think it's a good pick. I don't think it can go wrong for them. Worst case scenario is they cut him. It's a 4th round pick. And I don't really see the loss there. I think that was just a good pick that you really don't see sometimes from those teams picking up in the top half a lot of the times.
No, and when we talk about like what picks retain the most value, it generally is quarterbacks. I mean, you look at a guy like Rosen, who everybody says he absolutely flopped, and they're able to flip him for a 2nd round pick. You know what I mean? So Eason in the 4th round, worst case scenario, you could probably trade him if if maybe he isn't the right guy for your team. You could probably trade him for a 5 or a 6, honestly. Whereas if you would have taken a D end or a D tackle there, I don't know if you're going to have that same value if they don't pan out. Kind of as we saw with like a Terrell Basham a couple years ago. They take him, and was it the 2nd or the 3rd round?
The 3rd.
3rd round. And it doesn't pan out, and you waive him. Well, a guy like Jacob Eason at the quarterback position, I think he does have a lot of those intangibles, so there is a lot of value there, even if he isn't the guy. And I do think that when you have 2 quarterbacks on your roster right now in Brissett and Rivers that are both on 1-term deals, essentially, worst case scenario, you're kind of drafting your backup for next year. Like I can't hate on that at all. I think that's a really solid pick. So with that being said, now you're going to get into the offense?
Yeah, we talked about the bench. Let's talk about the stars now.
Yes, sir. So when it comes to starters, Mike, obviously there's a couple changes on here. You bring in Phillip, you draft Pittman. What do you kind of think about this offense compared to last year?
Yeah, I think obviously the big question mark, and I think it's on everyone's mind, is Phillip Rivers going to be that guy? Is he really going to elevate this team to the next level? I'll let you get your speculations into that. I'm going to touch on the rest of the team because I think I have more thoughts in there. It's a solid team. I think the weapons, the running back core, if anything's going to help out Phillip Rivers, it's these weapons that they have them. T.Y., Pittman, and then obviously the stable of running backs. I think that's huge. And then being able to pick up someone like Trey Burton on such a small contract, I think, and step right probably into that Eric Ebron role for them, kind of as an end zone threat, use them in short yard situations. That's huge. Obviously, this is some good front office management here, some good team management. And then the offensive line. It's a top 5 offensive line, and what better to put behind it, I guess, than a veteran quarterback. I think that's going to help Phillip out immensely. He's going to have protection probably maybe more than he's ever had with the Chargers. So,
no, that was actually right where I was going to go. I was going to say, like, if you think of who San Diego had, it's like, okay, you have Melvin Gordon, Austin Eckler, a solid running back kind of duo there. Here, Marlon Mack, Jonathan Taylor, Naheem Hines, Jordan Wilkins, all guys that they're really solid players, I think. And then receivers like, okay, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. Well, now you got T.Y., Michael Pittman, and even as you're kind of 3 and 4, Pascal and Paris Campbell. I think those are 2 really solid options who, I mean, we saw Pascal last year when T.Y. was hurt. He was kind of putting up wide receiver 1 production. And obviously that was just due to the volume he was getting. He's not a number 1 guy. But I think that he fits perfectly in that 3 or 4 role. And then, I mean, tight end, Phillip has Hunter Henry in L.A. Here, Jack Doyle and Trey Burton. I think those 2 added up probably do about what Henry's done in L.A. And then that offensive line, that's really where the difference comes in. You said top 5. I think you could even narrow that down to top 3. Honestly, I mean, where else are you getting 2 probably top 5, top 10 tackles, and then Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly? Man, that's just an exciting front 5 to watch. So I do think that if Phillip is going to succeed anywhere, it is Indianapolis. I think this is a really good spot for him. Even if it does only turn into kind of a 1-year endeavor, I still think that this is a team kind of that's ready to compete now. And I think that Phillip kind of on his last leg, kind of right in that last chapter of his career in a division that I think that, as we'll see here, has kind of taken a step back. I think it's a win-win signing. The only question that I'll have to you is with Phillip Rivers, do you think that they were – like that he was kind of the best guy, or do you think that they would have been better off going for a Bridgewater, a Cam, or even just rolling with Brissett? Where do you kind of fall on that whole kind of controversy.
Yeah, I honestly don't think Philip Rivers is the guy. We saw the drop off in the Chargers. They had the weapons last year. That wasn't their problem. They had the weapons, and I think it wasn't the worst offensive line play we've seen from the Chargers. We've seen much worse in the past. I think the drop off you've seen from Rivers' game last year. I think I can't imagine it gets better this year. Hopefully, maybe coming into new offense, maybe they're going to try to work around him and putting him in the best position, but I'm not even sure he can get the ball to T.Y. Hilton 40, 50 yards down the field, to be honest with you. The arm strength just wasn't there last year. So I don't think he was the way to go. I think if you want kind of one name you didn't throw out there, I think would have been an interesting kind of pick here is someone like maybe Jameis Winston. Like if you could find a way to cut those 30 interceptions and just have the 5,000 yards and the 30 receptions, and maybe if you cut that down to half, 15, this is a playoff team and this is a competing team. So I think that would have been a good one. Cam, obviously that the kind of playmaker, adding him into that mix, think would have been a good mix too. But I think for this team, I wouldn't have went safe with quarterback. I would have went something kind of like it's either going to make or break. It's going to either, hit or it's going to totally go off the deep end. I think that would have been better for this team because they have the talent to compete not only in the division, but for the Super Bowl, I think.
I agree with you for the most part, but I do kind of question. You said you might not have went with someone so safe. I don't really know if Philip Rivers is safe, honestly, at this point. I think that he's kind of the epitome of volatility, and we saw that last year. He started the year pretty solid, and then towards the end, like you said, he kind of did fall off. So it's really the question of what Philip Rivers are we going to get. I do think there would have maybe been some value in staying with a safer option, either if you did stay with Jacoby Brissett or sign like Teddy Bridgewater. I do think that those would have been the two safe options, but I do think you're kind of at that strange point where your roster can elevate your quarterback, but you also still kind of need a quarterback who can elevate your roster as well. And I do think that Philip offers that. I'm not sure if he does as much as like a Cam Newton would have, but overall, I really can't complain about the signing, assuming it's only a one-year endeavor. I don't really think this is Philip Rivers. I don't think he's going to be here till he's 43 or something like that. I think it is mostly a short-term proposition. Right now you have $48 million between him and Brissett coming off the books next offseason. I think then you can kind of either splurge in free agency or you can try and maybe pull off a trade. You just have the cap flexibility to do a lot of stuff. You could even put in a rookie quarterback given how solid the rest of this roster is. And I think that you'll kind of stay right around the top of the AFC South. So I think that as much as maybe Philip wasn't the best option, I think that he was solid and you didn't mortgage your long-term future to get him. So I can't really complain at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree, but I think a lot of the more questions, I think this is a good, obviously, offense. I think really what's going to make a break is the defense. And I guess just going into it, I've been starting kind of my thoughts, but what are some of your thoughts on this defense?
Well, I think when you look at it, especially after the DeForest Buckner trade, what you see is that they have playmakers at every single level of the defense, which, as we've said in previous videos, is incredibly important. But at the same time, they also kind of have holes at every level of the defense, which I'm not sure if it's ideal at this point. I know last year they were kind of in like that middle of the pack in terms of defensive production, and I don't know if they really did anything to either go like pull much ahead of that or fall behind either. I think that the Buckner trade is a huge improvement, but at the same time, your cornerback play is still really suspect. You have guys like Quincy Wilson who you just traded away to the Jets because they didn't pan out. You kind of just have holes everywhere. We don't really know what Xavier Rhodes is going to have to offer. Bobby Okereke and Kari Willis had solid years last year, but I don't know if those guys are really long-term starters. And you could say the same with Tomoko Toure at the same time. So I think that while there are definitely playmakers, I think that here you have a lot of really, really good A to B plus level talents. But then I think you also have some kind of like C minus D guys that are going to be getting substantial playing time. So kind of off that, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. I think there's obviously holes on every level of this defense, but they had the playmakers. So I'm interested to see if these playmakers can make up sometimes the spot of two. And I think obviously in the secondary it might be a little bit hard, but can DeForest Buckner be used in a way that like you really don't see the hole in with the D tackle and something up the middle because they're using them in multiple spots. They're lining them up in different places, making front fives uncomfortable on the other end of the ball. But also in the same way with that, I think if you look at the top defensive free agents still available, you got Logan Ryan, Marcel Darius, Ziggy Ansah, Jadeveon Clowney, Damon Snacks Harrison. All of them make sense for this team. You could really, and maybe that's a problem. It kind of shows that they have holes on every part of this defense, but you could basically plug every one of those players in it, and it makes sense, and it still works for them. So I guess I don't know if that speaks to the problems with this defense and the holes, or if they could still maybe just use that one or two more players to kind of throw them over. So I'd love to see at least one of those players come in and kind of see how it forms. Hopefully, I think I would rather see it on the front end of the front four. I think adding a big body in the middle, or adding another defensive pass rusher, whether it be Ziggy, Clowney, or someone in that mold, I think will do a lot for this team. I think that's probably where I'd like to see it, but they can really use any of those guys I listed.
No, I completely agree. And what we talk about is if you're not going to upgrade the secondary, the number one thing to mask kind of a questionable secondary is improving your pass rush. So a lot of those guys you mentioned, or even like an Everson Griffin, who you didn't mention, like those guys would be able to step right in a 4-3 and not only mentor some of those young guys, but also really help you compete now and try and secure this division. So, I mean, they have 24 million cap space. I think that you could even maybe swing 2 or 3 of these guys at this point. You know, the market, I don't want to say it's dried up, but it seems like we're kind of at a stalemate with some of these top guys. So, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if you could bring in like, Everson Griffin, maybe a Darqueze Dennard, and then maybe a Eric Reed or, someone in the secondary, Rashad Jones. I think that you could actually reasonably still bring in guys at each level of the defense that could really kind of levy all of my concerns. You're kind of in the same line, I assume, right?
Yeah, I just don't think this late in the year you're going to see a team picking up 2 to 3 free agents. As much as we often kind of like that. This I don't even call it third, fourth. It could be even the fifth market that we're seeing. So there's a lot of talent always available for those that you could find really good value for teams that are looking for maybe 1, 2 to even 3 more pieces, and just teams just for some reason don't like to take that jump, take that bite, and see if they can make a difference. So I'm totally with you, but do I think this team will do it? No.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the one thing that I will say is like with this being kind of like extenuating circumstances, this is kind of an unusual market. I think that we saw those first couple waves be a little bit drier than we expected. So maybe like you said, these fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh waves of free agents, maybe it will be a little bit more fruitful. But still, I don't know if I see the Colts going out there and signing 3 big name guys like that, even though they definitely still have the potential to. And really, if they did, I think that they could potentially become, with this schedule especially, I think they really could become a top seed in the AFC, barring obviously Phillip Rivers' play completely falling off a cliff. Mike, what are you kind of thinking for this team when it comes to kind of predicting their 2020 schedule?
Yeah, to be honest, I can see a lot of things from this team. It's one I really can't pin. I think they're close to, if not a playoff team. I think they are a playoff team, but I think it could go really either way. I could see this team kind of maybe catching some injuries quick. Maybe Philip Rivers isn't the guy they're looking for, and this team somehow be a 7-8 win team. I could see it. Maybe they're just scraping into the playoffs with like 9 wins, or I could see this team somehow maybe scraping 11 to even 12, might be pushing it, but maybe be in that upper tier team and maybe be a top seed in the AFC. I think this team really could fall in a lot of positions, but where I see him is probably right around a 9-win team. I think they can maybe be elevated at 10, whether see how the playoff situation works out. But I think they fall probably towards the end of the playoff race.
I agree for the most part. I know Vegas has their odds set at 9, their over-under set at 9 wins, and I kind of fall right in line with that, right in line with you. I was kind of talking about the volatility of Phillip Rivers, and I think that kind of plays to the volatility of this season. You're facing the NFC North and the AFC North as your 2 divisions. I don't think that those are that's definitely not the worst schedule that we've seen. I think that there's a lot of winnable games there, but the problem is that you have to kind of set a standard of play to win those games. I think that, as we kind of said in previous videos, the Packers and the Vikings, they definitely took a step back, but the question is, did you take a step up enough? Obviously, we talked about the Buckner trade. And, now they're finally going to get another guy opposite of Justin Houston who will probably have more than 5 sacks this year. But I don't know if that is going to put them over the top to being an 11-win team, like you said, but it's definitely possible. I think that we've seen, and we'll cover a lot of what the Texans did this offseason. I don't know if they're going to win the division this year. So I do think the division is up for the taking. It's just a question of, is Philip Rivers going to go grab it,
Yeah, and I think one other piece is, yeah, as you have him kind of right here on the slide, Darius Leonard was out last season, so I think getting him back in a full season, full groove, adding DeForest Buckner in front of him, I think obviously he's kind of that all-pro. He kind of almost has that perennial linebacker the way he plays. So I love the player. I'm excited to see him this year, and he might be kind of a guy that can maybe transform and fill some of these holes on this defense all by himself.
No, and another guy that we didn't really mention on that last slide was Anthony Walker. I think that him and Leonard could be kind of infringing on that Pro Bowl / All-Pro duo up the middle. And I do think that Buckner adds so much value to their game, and we could see those guys take the next steps, and maybe they'll cover up some of those deficiencies elsewhere, and maybe they will push this team to 10, 11 wins. I don't think it's the craziest thing in the world to say. I just think that a lot of it's going to depend on, as I said, kind of Philip Rivers and that offense.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. It could be a real nasty duo in that linebacking core. And speaking of a nasty duo, we're here, me and Mike. We put out these videos. We hope you guys like them. And if you do, leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment. Tell us your thoughts. Did we suck? Which I know we didn't. Is there something you disagree with? Is there something you agree with? Is there something you want us to talk about? Is there maybe a team you want us to do next? Because if you say it, we will do it. Hey, Mike, if someone is a Steelers fan and be like, hey, Mike, I want to see a Steelers video. What video are we going to do next?
Dude, we are hitting up my man Mike Tomlin and the Pittsburgh Steelers, baby. You just got to toss them in the comments. You just got to toss them in.
Damn right. So hopefully you guys like these videos. The 20 people that we get in, please support the group. We're trying to improve your football knowledge. So from there, Mike, do you have anything else to say?
Nah, man. All I'm going to say is we're mic'd up. Now we mic'd out.
Deuces.